Hey guys, it's Dash Crown, and today I'm going to show you, or just kind of explain the process of how I wrote my first novel, A Feather Dipped in Shadow, when I was 12. So the first point would obviously be an idea. Having an idea is something that happens consistently in our mind, but some ideas are broader and happen to stick out more than others. And that's where the idea of A Feather Dipped in Shadow came into play. When you come up with an idea for your first novel, you want to make sure that it's something that's unique to you. Of course, even traditionally published authors that are popular, such as Rebecca Yarros, Lauren Roberts, or even Victoria Aveyard, they all got their ideas from somewhere. No idea is completely original. However, it's how you develop that idea that makes that originality seen. For instance, if I wanted to write a book about a little girl in the woods who meets a wolf, I wouldn't say, oh, my grandmother's sick and I'm going to bring this to her, and then have a big bad wolf try and trick me into thinking he's the grandma. No, I could say something like, she lives in a village, not just in a cottage. That adds originality to the idea, and you can keep playing on this stuff to make sure that it's something that's both unique to you and widen to an audience. And another thing as well is that a lot of people, they think that originality means that no one else has ever thought of the idea before. But I guarantee you someone
has thought of the idea.
But as hard as that is to just kind of like realize, you have to understand sometimes that, like, the vampire book trope. You can't write a vampire book and say it's the only vampire book. However, you can say that since that sort of genre, that book trope, has a wide variety of people listening and wanting to read it, then you can 100% say that, and that also helps your self-esteem as well to get you to that place where you're like, oh, I can write this book. Next is the plot. It's one of the hardest parts of writing a book, I think, because you have to really dig deep into that idea, and it can be so hard. I mean, all I want to do is just kind of
die
when I'm writing a plot, because it's so much work to make sure that you don't have any plot holes throughout the entire book. So the plot is one of the big obstacles, but in order to write a plot, you just really need to figure out what happens beginning, middle, and end. Because if you can do that, you can write a book. Another thing about the plot is that you want to make sure that it's not too off of the story arc. For example, if you're advertising the book, which I'll talk about later, as a vampire novel, or like Little Red Riding Hood retold, then you want to make sure that it doesn't turn, like, the wolf doesn't turn into like a giraffe, and then like Little Red Riding Hood goes to a zoo. Like, you want to make sure that it stays on the plot a little bit, and like the vampires can't just switch into zombies. Like, you can't advertise it as a vampire book and then it'd be a zombie book. So that's kind of important when you think about advertising too, but don't worry about that yet. Next is the outline. Like, the hardest thing to do. These three first steps are the most important, but also the hardest. So the outline is a very important thing when writing a book, because the thing is, you just don't want to go straight into the book not knowing what's going to happen. So you want to give at least a vague, I'd say 2 or 3 sentences. It's a vague little synopsis on each chapter. That way you know what's going to happen next, and that's really, it's really important. So it definitely helps me too. That way I actually know where my writing's going, and it also, again, it helps with not steering off that plot. Next is drafting. Drafting is very fun. The first draft is obviously really the hardest, but if you can get to that first 100 pages, it's smooth sailing from there. There will still be a lot of rocky times, and you know, it's going to be hard to write some days, but after you finish those first 100 pages, it's like you know that you can do it. And I will never stop like feeling that joy when I hit 100 pages, because it really is, it's just it's incredible, that feeling, because it's a feeling of accomplishment, but like the feeling that you need to do even more. And that's why drafting to me is like one of my favorite things to do. And it's when you start to see your characters come to life, when you can start to relate with them more. And that's when your writing starts to grow, when your writing style becomes more apparent, and when, readers would initially get into the book. So one thing you have to worry about when you're drafting is you want to make sure that you stay close to the synopsis, but if you feel as if your characters it doesn't match it, a lot of times writers don't trash the characters, they instead trash the outline. Not the plot, but the outline, the order in which things happen. Because the reason being, characters are things that are needed in a story. Without the characters, the story wouldn't be complete. But if you created this character specifically for this storyline, then you should know already, or you will know already, that sometimes when the characters are there, you follow the characters, because the characters become their own person and they have their own story to tell. And it's really important that you tell the character's story, not just your own, because the characters are parts of you. So it's like telling your own story or the character's story throughout that book, and it is very important. Next is my least favorite, revising. When you revise a book, a lot of times you would want a peer or a family member or some trusted person, friend or family, enemy, frenemies, whatever, to read your novel. And this can be really scary at first, because I know I really struggle with having people read my novel, but the feedback that they give you is very important. And you really take that to heart too, even subconsciously. It just clicks, and then hold on, I need to do this because they said I needed to do this. And it's really important, it really is. When you're revising, it doesn't mean you have to trash your whole entire story. It just means that some things just don't need to be there, or some things do need to be there that weren't there before. And the reason revising is so important is because you want to really make sure that you're able to still tell the story, but you can tell it in a better way than your first draft ever did, which is really important when writing a story. So yeah, and then self-revising, just read through it with some fresh eyes. Like, imagine you have no idea what the story is about, and just highlight, tab things, just kind of annotate it to understand the story better, because that definitely gives you a deeper understanding of your story. When you're editing, I feel like you deal with a lot of self-doubt, especially because the thing is, self-doubt is one of those things, it's like a seed, and it slowly grows and grows until it becomes into this level of feeling that you cannot do this, when you really can. Anyone and everyone can write a book of any age, of any genre, of any kind. It doesn't matter your language or ethnicity, at anything. All that it matters is that you are willing and you have the heart to do it. And even if you don't think you do, you do. Everyone does. It's just, writing is a constant battle. It's like an uphill battle. But when you think of a hill, it's not going to be smooth sailing. It's an endless hill. It's like a backpack if you carry it. It gets lighter along the way, but it never really ceases to exist. And it's still going to be heavy. But you have to learn to cope with it and to feel it and to accept that backpack as part of you. And that's really the hard part of editing. Also, it is really hard to edit. Like, to find those mistakes in your book, can't do it. But anyway, part of editing is just saying, you've got this, even if you do not got it. So editing is just making sure that all your dialogue looks good, that you're not missing any sort of punctuation, capital letters, just grammar in general, and then also making sure your story flows, which some people were not taught in school. But you want to make sure that you feel something through that writing when you're writing a book, because it just being flat, even if it's nonfiction, it's not going to necessarily be the best that it can be. And it just, sometimes you have to realize that it's not going to be great, and you have to remember that you have to edit this book so much. Like, there is not going to be a day where you aren't trying to edit, but you just have to stop yourself, because editing while you were drafting never works out. So basically, editing is just looking for any mistakes and making sure that your story flows and that it's entertaining. Next is cover art. Cover art is what draws your reader in to begin with. It's the thing that catches your eye. For example, this book has a very metallic-y color to it, and it really draws your eyes to it. However, and this is just my opinion, I'm not talking about the book, I'm talking about the cover. Queen of Shadows. It's an amazing book. However, the cover doesn't draw your eyes as well as the old covers did, because they're not unique as much. Like, it's just a little bit dull. It could be better. Like, the coloring of the letters stands out very well. However, this does not look like a book I would pick up if I knew what it was. Like, if I didn't know what it was. So if you're looking for like websites or apps you can download to do your cover art, I'm happy to make another video about that, and comment down below if you do want that. But anyway, your cover art should be relevant to your story. Like, you shouldn't have a story about dragons and then have a mouse on the cover, and it being like a mouse in a rose, for example. You'd want something a little bit more, like, if it's like a harsh dragon book, like Fourth Wing, you don't want something like a rose on there, because I get it, like a rose could have its thorns possibly, but a mouse and a rose are often depicted as like weaker points of a story, like a weaker main character. And if it's like Fourth Wing, that wouldn't represent Violet Swordgale. So you definitely want to make sure that your cover art represents your story, or some aspect of your story, or even just like what happens, like the plot. I don't know, but it has to both be like visually appealing, and it has to relate to your story. That way it's not just completely random. Again, with the retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, if you do write a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, then you don't want, for example, a cover like Reckless, for example. This cover is like this arrow that doesn't necessarily represent Little Red Riding Hood. So you would want something like a wolf silhouette or something like that that would represent the retelling. That way someone won't pick it up, for example, thinking it's about an archer. No, it's about a little girl going into the woods to go visit her sick grandmother, who is then chased in all the things by a big bad wolf. So the cover art is usually done after you have your idea, you plot, you outline, you draft, you revise, and you edit. So then you have to publish. It's a very exciting thing. And this video, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more just on the aspect of how to do it, and I'll have other videos about like traditionally publishing and self-publishing and things like that if anyone has any questions. And so publishing is like when you push your book out into the world. So if you were to traditionally publish, you would generally hire an agent, and that agent would take your manuscript, aka the novel you've written and edited, and you they then push the book out to different publishers to see if they are interested, the publishers that would be best fit for your book or your manuscript. And so when you're an author on submission, that's what that is called, when you are waiting for your agent to push it out to different publishers and get feedback. That's called being on submission. And when you do that, it's just a waiting process from here. And when you do this, I recommend like working on other books or having a mental health week or something to just tone it down and calm your body, because it is a very stressful time. So for self-publishing, initially if you were to use something like Ingram Spark or KDP, you just upload your cover, you upload your book, you upload all the information, the ISBN, etc., and those things push it out for you. However, never mind. So after you've published your first novel, congratulations, you did it. And then it's time to market your book. So like I'm doing here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, I am marketing A Feather Dipped in Shadow and A Rose as Dark as Night like they are my children. I mean, I am pushing them to people, but I'm not pushing them too much to everybody. It's for the direct audience. You have to think about who is this book for and why should they read it? And then explain that to them. That is very important. For example, if you were to say, oh, this is the retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, and then like you try to market it to elderly people who or like middle-aged people who work in like woodworking and stuff, they're not gonna want to read it. So you have to make sure like it would generally be marketed towards teen and younger, and you have to make sure you have that audience so you know who your book is for, and just the writing style too. If it's an Old English, probably more of an adult audience versus like if it's has certain scenes in there and stuff that you should make it new adult, not young adult. So how to market. Marketing is fairly simple. So marketing and advertising, a lot of times, if I can find one, hold on. For example, on the back of Queen of Shadows, it says each page teems with fierce intensity, romantic tension, and propulsive suspense. USA Today. So USA Today is a magazine, and basically, people who are a fan of this will want to read this book. And a lot of times they'll also have other authors quote on the book. Authors would send in manuscripts, and then the other author that received said manuscript would then write a quote about the book for the author to put on the back of their cover. And basically that pulls readers in. For example, if you were to have Tahira Mafi or something, her name, like that on the back of your book, then obviously fans of Shatter Me and This Woven Kingdom would obviously want to read said book because one of their favorite authors read it. And I'm not saying that you absolutely have to get a quote on the back of the book, but that is an ideal way of marketing and advertising in the publishing industry. So if you would like a more in-depth video on any of these things, please just comment down below, subscribe, and turn those notifications on, and I will see you soon. Love you, bye.